Frogbeat blog.
Summertime and the living is easy. Welcome to episode 55 of the Frogbeat Blog podcast. And it's hot and sunny here, and we're gonna do things about things, and I'm gonna talk about other things, and just be all cool and summery. So just chillax, man.
Frogbeat blog. The Frogbeat blog.
Right, sorry about my introduction. It was a bit laid back, wasn't it? What we got today? Bee stops. Yep, the Dutch are at it again with their clever ideas. They're pretty cool, the Dutch, aren't they? They used to have an empire like the British, but they give it up quite willingly. I think it was quite willingly, and now they just spend their time being pretty cool, creative, and inventive. And they've been at it again. And this is what it says: Utrecht, a city in Holland, the Netherlands, recently gave makeovers to 316 bus stops. Now, I'm not sure if that's the number bus of the 316 and it was just the bus stops on the route of the 316, or whether it is actually 316 bus stops. Anyway, they gave makeovers to 316 bus stops, outfitting them with green roofs. The roofs are covered with sedum flowers and other plants. What did you say? I said flowers. No, sedum flowers and other plants, which act as an oasis for bees. Oasis for bees, is that like a pollen supernova? Anyway, carry on. Plus, the added greenery as a slew of other positive environmental effects. The plants will also help absorb rainwater, capture dust or pollutants from the air, and regulate temperatures. Not to mention, adding plants in urban spaces has plenty of other benefits, including reducing noise pollution, reducing stress, increasing biodiversity, beautifying the city, absorbing carbon, and improving air quality. How cool is that? Can we have that in Britain, please? Please, can we? Please? Right, now, talking of cool things, we all know elephants are really cool, don't we? Actually, one of my first podcasts, I did a feature on an elephant sanctuary in Thailand, and I also found out that they are quite musical, and there is an elephant orchestra that actually records and makes albums. Far better than anything that Ed Sheeran has ever done, too. Well, not only do some of us humans think elephants are cool, in fact, most humans think elephants are cool. It's just them arseholes that go around shooting them that are arseholes, basically. Anyway, we all think they're cool, but frogs really like them too. Listen on. Newly published research reveals that frogs are laying their eggs. Oh, isn't it tadpoles? Frog spawn. Anyway, maybe some frogs lay eggs, do they? Frogs are laying their eggs in rain-filled footprints of Asian elephants called, the Latin name is Elephas maximus. That must be the big-eared ones, isn't it? Which then provide a safe home for growing tadpoles. The footprints eventually fade away, but they last for a year or more on the forest floor and can serve as important habitats during the dry season, even as stepping stones between frog populations. Talk about having an environmental footprint. Anyway, this represents an important step in understanding the role of Asian elephants as ecosystem engineers. African elephants have long been recognised for the way that they affect the natural systems. And a similar study published in 2016 found tadpoles and dozens of insect species living in elephant footprints in Uganda. I'm having trouble today, aren't we? Elephant footprints in Uganda. But Asian elephants have not benefited from the same level of scientific study. Well, why not? Well, it's about time they were anyway. So there you go. Really cool elephants. Frogs and elephants get on really well.
The Frogbeat blog.
Right, 4 tigers have mauled to death their tamer in southern Italy, fueling calls for a ban on the use of animals in circuses as Parliament debates the issue. Police said the 61-year-old tamer, Ettore Weber, was attacked. That's Weber, that's not Italian, but anyway, was attacked by the tigers on Thursday during a training session in Triggiano, a small town in the Puglia region. Well, he certainly Triggiano'd their attack mode thing, didn't he? All the circuses, 8 tigers were impounded by the police. What were they going to do? Interview them, triggering protests from animal welfare associations. The Anti-Vivisection League, LAV, called for the tigers involved in the attack not to be killed and urged the government to speed up legislation to ban circus animals. Yeah, too bloody right. Tigers must be saved and placed in an environment suitable for their natural needs, LAV said in a statement. Italy's parliament is discussing a new bill to ban wild animals from circuses. Well, we know what we say to that, eh?
Ooh, good, I hope it hurt, I hope it hurt, ha 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 ha. Ooh, good, I hope it hurt, I hope it hurt a lot. Hey! Ooh, good, I hope it hurt, I hope it hurt, ha 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 ha. Ooh, good, I hope it hurt, I hope it hurt a lot. Hey!
Right, well, unless you've been living on the moon, you will have heard of this, but if you were living on the moon, you probably heard of it anyway, because it's 50 years since man landed on the moon. And yes, I'm old enough to remember it. There were all sorts of things available for kids at the time. It was quite an exciting time, and breakfast cereals had Apollo landing craft and rockets that you could cut out the backs of the boxes and build your very own spacecraft. Anyway, amidst all this fuss, there was an article done by a scientist who worked out how long it would take to cycle to the moon. Don't ask me why he did it, but, I'm into cycling. I thought it would be quite interesting. And it was quite a complicated sum that he did, because obviously you've got to work out Earth's gravity to start with, and then the less you get away, the further it is, and they worked it all out. And guess how long it was? Go on, have a guess. Before I tell you, just have a guess. How long do you think it would take to cycle to the moon? Well, the answer, after lots of complex calculation, was fucking ages. Actually, no, seriously, it was approximately 267 days. Which, wow, I actually thought it would be longer than that, didn't you? Mandy, that is cycling 24/7 without any breaks. Okay, so you might want to factor them in. But it's 250,000 miles, and it would take less than a year to get there. I might try that sometime when I'm bored or retired or something, but that's all right, isn't it? Less than a year to cycle to the moon.
Cycle to the moon, come let me pedal amongst the stars.
Well, something like that anyway.
Is it okay to talk about drugs? Is it okay? Gonna do it anyway.
So, is it okay? Listen to this for a headline. Nurses off their faces after Grandad brings cannabis cake to hospital. Nurses were left, quote, off their faces after a Grandad thanked them with a cake that was filled with cannabis last month. Police arrived at Warrington Hospital. Hey, that's where I'm from, Warrington. Police arrived at Warrington Hospital to discover that staff had eaten a red velvet cake. Never heard of one of them. A red velvet cake that was full of cannabis. It is thought that the cake was made for the old man's grandson's 18th birthday, and he had no idea about the contents. A member of staff said 3 or 4 of them had eaten the cake, fell off their faces and relaxed afterwards. Cheshire Police confiscated the cake and tested it. Yeah, I bet they did. But decided not to press charges after they'd eaten it all. Oh, well, there you go. And we often talk about bees, don't we? And we talk about cannabis. Well, here they are together in the same article. Well, not strictly cannabis, but hemp. Hemp could help save the bees, providing an excellent source of nutrition during the season they need it most, a new study finds. Expanding hemp cultivation in the United States, which is obviously where the study's done, could provide food for the bees during a time of the year when few other options are available to them, a new study concludes. Researchers from Colorado State University set up bee traps in industrial hemp fields during peak flowering season to determine whether hemp was a valuable source of pollen for foraging bees. Well, guess what? It turns out that it is. Hemp flowers are apparently prolific pollen producers, making them attractive to a diverse range of bees. On top of that, they bloom right when bees need them most. Hemp flowering occurs between the end of July and the end of September, a time when other pollinator-friendly crop plants are scarce across the heartland of the United States. Industrial hemp can play an important role in providing sustained nutritional options for bees during the cropping season, writes lead author of the study, Colton O'Brien, a soil and crop scientist for Colorado State University. In addition to the food, hemp also provides habitat. While pollinators facing debilitating challenges from a number of different stressors, lack of healthy habitat is chief among them, the researchers note. So there you have it. So the more industrial hemp is grown for whatever reason, whether it's for smoking or whether it's for CBD oil like they're doing in America, it's going to be good for the bees. So that's a win-win for everybody, isn't it? So I think this week it has been okay, hasn't it, to talk about drugs.
Is it okay to talk about drugs? Is it okay? Gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, it's Lanigan. It's sexy Lanigan. Ooh, yeah, it's Lanigan. Ooh, yeah, it's Lanigan.
Right, it's that time of the week. Well, it's not that time of the week because it's that time of the fortnight.
Yeah.
We've got Len here. Hi, Len.
Hello.
How you doing? Looking forward to summer?
Very much so, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
same
I think
here.
I feel like sort of burnout is happening. And
Yeah.
it's, I'm looking forward to sort of starting a new fresh life, in fact.
I know, yeah, to get your life back for a few weeks.
Yeah.
So you sent me a link, and I can't remember. I've been that busy, I've forgotten what it was about. What was the link you sent me?
We were kind of talking about it, sort of starting up a new thing for the podcast, which was like recommendations of the week, wasn't it? And you were...
I'd watched the Minimalism thing. What's it called? Is it called Minimalism?
That's a good question. That's a good question, you know.
Yes, we should have...
Yeah. Well,
Be
it's
prepared.
the Minimalist podcast, so if you're going to follow them, it's it's Ryan Nicodemus and Joshua Fields Milburn,
Yes.
and they are what they define themselves as, the Minimalists. So
Yes.
if you're going to look for them on Instagram or Twitter and stuff, then it's at the Minimalists.
Because I told listeners the other week that my daughter's got Netflix, and I didn't realise when you've got a Netflix account, you can have about 5 sub-accounts in that. So she told me, so I've got one now, so I'm catching up on all this stuff on Netflix, and that was one of the first things that came up.
Yeah.
I think you can put preferences in of the sort of things you like to watch, and that came up, and I went, oh, that's a bit strange that that's come up. But it was really interesting, and
Yeah.
they were the people that you first heard of into minimalism.
Yeah, it's kind of like I feel I had that thread of sort of thought processes, like, and they kind of cemented it for me a little bit after watching the film. So I started like being able to assign terminology to it and assign almost strategies. They have some really good strategies. They're not the only ones. There's people on several Netflix shows, different blogs, and various different websites you can follow that have strategies to help with minimalism. And I've felt that strategies have actually really kickstarted and helped me.
Yeah, because the interesting thing about the program is they start off and hardly anyone's interested in them, are they? And then it is one of those sort of like redemption things, and in the end, they look kind of justified in what they're doing. I mean, I suppose when they made the documentary, they wouldn't have had much idea about how it was going to end. They still might have had 10 people in an air hangar somewhere, but it seems like it caught the mood in America.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, and they're still touring. They're still producing a very popular podcast that's
which I haven't listened to yet.
Yeah,
Is
it's
it
good.
called The Minimalist?
yeah. And I listened to it this morning, in fact.
And what does it do? Is it just the chat on, or does it talk about strategies, or what?
All of the above. So they've got a nice little format now. So they often have a guest in from various different websites or writers or musicians or things like that, and they talk about various different subjects. So today was all about finances. So it was how to sort of look more clearly at and being intentional about your finances. So minimalism often is sort of in this context is mistook for like an art form or something like that. In fact, it's just a way of intentional living. The number one thing they always say at the very end of the podcast is love people and use things because the opposite never works. And I've always quite liked that as quite a nice encompassing umbrella of like all the things that they talk about and like. And yeah, some things I don't agree with, some things I do, but it's a good starting point.
Yes, and you sent me a link leading on from that about
indeed.
iPhones.
Yeah, so I am
Those dirty, disgusting,
I know,
consumerist iPhones.
full of chemicals and full of awful metals and things like that, and you get lots of who made them, what's the label like, and things like that. But there was an interesting article I read that's it kind of flips it all on its head a little bit and thinks about, well, in the 90s, for example, how many massive devices with various chemicals and metals and things in them.
Ghetto blasters for
Ghetto
the amount of plastic
blasters.
and metal in a big ghetto blaster.
Yeah. So even if you're watching Stranger Things, you like look at all these games consoles and the sizes of the tellies and the radios and recording devices and cameras and all sorts of things. You had many devices that you frequently replaced
Yes.
and often didn't get recycled properly. The thing with the iPhone is that it rolls in all of, or any smartphone rolls in all of these products into one smaller box, and actually they've made the recycling process, especially with iPhones, very, very efficient, so they can draw the metals back out of there and build new things with it.
And it worked out, haven't it? Is it the what was the statistics? Is something's gone down? Is it the production of
wish I had it in front of me now.
Yes,
Don't I?
it's something, isn't it? Is that less things are being actually made and less chemicals are being used and that sort of thing. How ecologically sound are they? Is there still a lot of dodgy chemicals? Can they actually take them apart? And
there's actually a machine that's got they've given it a female name, and if you watch it on YouTube, it's actually an incredible thing. It can take an iPhone apart in like less than a second. And
so they're taken apart by machines.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter how damaged they are, you can put it in the recycling programs, and you can also, if the device is still working, you can get a cashback sort of system. This is with Apple, and so it keeps everything quite efficient, really.
Yeah.
And the thing is like, and I do, one of the biggest parts of being an Apple fanboy in a way is that the sheer longevity of the products is like, and I'm like that with everything, whether it's a pair of shoes, a jacket, a device. Try to do my research, make sure you're very intentional with what you purchase, and then make sure it lasts a long time.
Yeah, because I've got Mary's old phone, which I'm sure is about 3 years old now, and it's the only trouble with it is as I don't want to replace it, but I was hearing someone else was telling me that they might not at some point they might stop updating the software. Now I don't know whether that means you just can't get new apps, which I'm not bothered about. It's because I just use it for the internet mainly. But whether it'll actually still function, I don't know. But I want to see how long I can keep this phone.
Absolutely.
With.
I mean, there's lots of really interesting stuff happening actually, because you can get now variations on apps. So for example, for places like India, emerging smartphone market often have smartphones but not very high-end smartphones.
Right.
So for example, Spotify, you can download like a light version of the app, so it still functioned in a fast, efficient way, but it's not quite got the bells and whistles and the animations with that. So it's actually extending the lifespan of these devices. Often developers kind of run away with themselves as they're tech people and think, well, if I've got the new phone in my pocket, then everyone's got the new phone in my pocket. But unfortunately, people can't afford to do that. I'm running a 5-year-old phone now.
Yeah, well, it's not a question of whether wanting to do it, it's whether we can get longevity, isn't it? Because I suppose we're not going to be able to fix our own phones, are we? I mean, mine's back. Right, I'm not sure what happened there, listeners. I've gone back to listen to it since I've got home, and halfway through my interview with Len, when I'm talking about my batteries wearing out because it's an old phone, it get cut off, but that was it. I think there's a couple of words or half a word missing out where I was on about my batteries. It's nothing exciting, so we'll carry on with the interview, eh? Means I need to charge it up more often.
Yep, same here.
Everything else seems all right about it, really.
Yeah, and I mean, some phones that are the better ones, that I suppose, for environmental wise, still have replaceable batteries that you can take out yourself. If it's Apple, then you go there and you book in an appointment and they do it for £45, and that should give it another few years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But even with Apple, for example, they still do security updates, but they don't do the new operating system updates. So, for example, my MacBook is 2011, so if you do the math, it's about 8-year-old now.
Oh, ancient. It's funny, isn't it, now, isn't it? These days, there was something that's 8 years old. We think,
Yeah, but it still works great, and it might last you another few years. So, but it's still getting security updates, which is vital to me for protection of my data and things like that. But it's not getting the operating system updates, which are two separate things.
And does that mean eventually that stuff won't be able to run on it?
Some things are clunky-ish, but it totally depends on your usage. If you're using very high-end 3D software or something like that, then it will struggle. For me, especially with what my job now and what I do at home is mostly going to be working on documents and browsing the web and that kind of thing. Yeah. So not too bad.
Yeah, so we're not going to stop people. People aren't going to not consume, are they?
No.
We just need to make people not want a new phone every year. And
it's about making the right choices. It's about making very conscious decisions, and it's intentional living. That's what I really go for, is intentional living. I keep repeating that term because that's what's important. And importantly, intentional living is something that you can fit into many, many different contexts. It's just thinking a bit more.
Yeah, but there's a lot of pressure though, isn't there? We live, and that's what the minimalist thing, the documentary goes on about. It's not like we're just neutral in this. We're bombarded day after day with adverts trying to sell us things from a very young age, aren't we? Even from children, babies as children as a year or two to 2 years old. You're bombarded with stuff. It is very hard to resist the the temptation that if I don't get the latest phone, I'm going to be behind, and I haven't got what my friends have got. And how do we change that culture, or do we accept that we're not going to?
I think a lot of people are already sort of quite savvy to that. I mean, myself as a relatively young-ish parent, my kids don't really have any exposure to advertisement at all because they're not on social media. We don't watch TV. They don't watch shows that are not, for example, on Channel 4 ITV. There's no. They don't watch Channel 5. It's just all about Netflix and BBC. So there's no adverts there.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, if you're just relying on Netflix, there's no adverts.
Nothing at all. No. I mean, you could argue the sort of product placement if it's a Barbie cartoon or something like that, but they don't. I've noticed that my daughters tend not to go through supermarkets going, "I want that, I want that, I want that." They're like, "That's nice," and then put it down. Yeah. So it's more of like it's very similar with adults. So for example, if you've got a Picasso painting or something like that, you don't think I have to consume this and own it and have it in my house. You can go to a museum and look at it and think, "That's cool." Yeah. And then not think about I don't need to own this.
Yeah, it's like you're incredibly rich and the desire to own and possess these things, but no. And that's what you've talked about more, isn't it? It's not so much about the possession. We're moving away from being a possession society as a hiring things. It's like with all the Adobe suite now. It's all you just hire it, don't you? Expensively. I mean, I was talking because we have it in college, and it's like £60 a month. Yeah.
But most people are going to be using it for yourself and me, and students are going to be using the educational licenses, which bring the price down quite a bit. Yeah. But we're very clever in the market, and they've kind of got a monopoly on it now, haven't they? So But subscription model services. I wish, we wish we had similar models to America, where communities have their libraries have services like with lawnmowers in them, for example.
Oh wow!
So you don't. I mean, think about a lawnmower. You don't. How often does your street? Everybody owns one, and you use it for what, like 15, depending on the size of your lawn, 15 minutes a month. Yeah. Whereas the entire street have one each. Why not have a repository on that street where you would then get the lawnmower from them?
Yes, community living, isn't
it? Community living is madness.
Yeah.
Madness.
Yeah. Well, that's a great positive point to end, other than it's all mad. But no, brilliant. Thank you for coming in once again.
You're very welcome.
Great man. Clever. Nature is clever. It's really, really clever. Nature ain't a Tory. Nature ain't a Trump. That's not saying much because they really, really don't own nature.
Right, so in this episode of Nature is Clever, I'm going to talk a bit about apes. Here's what this article says. 4 years ago, while excavating the rainforest floor of Ivory Coast, archaeologists from Leipzig's Max Planck Institute of Evolutionary Anthropology made a startling discovery. From a metre deep in the earth, the archaeologists began to uncover a series of crude tools that chimpanzees had passed down from generation to generation in order to enhance their food gathering abilities. In short, they discovered that we are living through the chimpanzee Stone Age. God, so that's pretty advanced, isn't it? And then following on from that, not just in the Stone Age, now they've entered the TV age. Well, not exactly, because humans have provided the TV for them, but this is interesting. Researchers from Duke University in North Carolina have discovered that chimpanzees become more sociable after watching films. The chimps were placed in pairs and subjected to a short video before the researchers measured how long it took them to approach their partners and how much time they spent together. The chimps would watch the video together, approach their partner faster, and spent longer in proximity to them. And what this ultimately means is that humans are not the only species able to gain greater social bonding from shared experiences. It also means that when you sit through a film with your friends, you're probably demonstrating evolutionary behaviour millions of years in the making. So we're not that different than chimps, are we? And while we're on Nature is Clever, I want to do a part 2 because there's 2 clever things this week. And this is the headline. It's a bit saucy, actually. Orchid lures bees with promise of sex with strangers. Male bees with an urge to add to the gene pool are exploited by orchids that pose as irresistibly scented exotic females, new research suggests. Sexually deceptive orchids, good name for a band that, isn't it? Hey, we're the sexually deceptive orchids. Sexually deceptive orchids rely for their own reproduction on male insects' drives to copulate. If a male mistakes the flowers for a female insect, his fruitless mating attempt will pollinate the orchid. Some orchid flowers are so exciting to males that they even ejaculate on the flower. I'm not sure I wanted to know that, but carry on. But although the visual deception is often superb, what really drives the males wild is the female sex pheromone cocktail that the orchid imitates. And another article, it says about orchids. Across Europe, Australia, Africa and South America, orchids have independently evolved ways to manufacture irresistible bouquets. Many of these smells mimic the sex pheromones, otherwise known as aphrodisiacs, of insects. Orchids release a perfume that mimics a fertile female insect, luring in male insects. Overcome by sexy female scent, the males are duped into attempting to mate with the flower. During their futile attempts at copulation, they pick up a gobbet of pollen. A gobbet? Is that the word? A gobbet of pollen, so that when they visit another flower, they will pollinate it. And what do male insects get in exchange for their labours? Absolutely bloody nothing. The sneaky orchid bastards, aren't they? Is nature really clever? Well, I'd say it was more like this.
Orchids are bastards, are really pretty bastards. Orchids are bastards, are pretty sneaky bastards. Tricking all the male bees with their sexy smells, giving out their pheromones, making bees like hell. Oh, orchids are bastards, are pretty sneaky bastards. Orchids are bastards, are pretty sneaky bastards. Orchids are bastards, are pretty sneaky bastards. Orchids are bastards.
Mother Earth, her name is Gaia. The temperature is getting higher. Very soon she'll be on fire. So don't be a climate then. She's on fire. Her name is Gaia. She's on fire.
I went to this talk the other day and the guy mentioned Steven Pinker. I don't know if you've heard of Steven Pinker. He's an author that basically says, no need to worry about everything. It's much better than it used to be. We live longer. Thousands of people are lifted out of poverty every day. We're progressing as societies go. And of course, this is true to an extent, isn't it? We don't get hung, drawn and quartered anymore for poaching a rabbit because we're starving. So that's progress. And in lots of other ways, society is becoming more tolerant and more liberal and more understanding, especially of various minorities. This is obviously despite this little alt-right blip that we're seeing, especially in America and in England at the moment. But generally, things are getting better. But what the guy in the talk didn't mention, because when I listened to Steven Pinker, he said this, he qualified this saying, yeah, things are getting better. Things are getting better apart from the threat of climate change and nuclear war. Whoa, hang on a second. That's a pretty big apart from, isn't it? Things are getting better apart from the things that are probably going to wipe us out in the next 100 years. Great, eh? And add to that, you've got mass extinction caused by human behaviour, overfishing, we're going to have fished out the oceans in the next 20, 30 years, deforestation, soil erosion with only 50 or so harvests left around the world. And it is hard to be optimistic, but we must do it, and I do try to be. And when I originally started out this podcast, I was just going to focus on sort of on positive things. But when I end up doing research, it's hard to avoid the science-based research that sort of tells us that because of human activity, mainly caused by consumerism and gross overconsumption of finite resources, that unless we change our behaviours, well, then we're fucked, basically, aren't we? So go on, Frogbeat, you happy bastard. Put a positive spin on that if you can. Anyway, this talk that I saw, the bloke went on to talk about global greening and how in the past few decades, tree cover the size of America had grown because of the rise in carbon dioxide in atmosphere, and he was wondering why it wasn't talked about more. And I'd never heard of this, so I thought I'd better go and look this up. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called global greening. And yes, carbon dioxide. We all know carbon dioxide is good for plants so that they will grow better. It's just a shame, isn't it, that the climate change caused by carbon dioxide means that pretty soon them trees are all going to struggle to adapt. Anyway, but this is what I found about global greening. And remember, the statement was carbon dioxide is responsible for global greening, which has led to tree cover the size of the USA. In the past few decades, it's led to the increase in the size of the tree cover. And here's what the NASA article says. You know, those radical lefties, NASA. For a quarter to half of Earth's from a quarter to half of Earth's vegetated lands has shown significant greening over the last 35 years, largely due to rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide, according to a new study published in Nature Climate Change. An international team of 32 authors from 24 institutes in 8 countries led the effort, which involved using satellite data from NASA's Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectrometer and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Advanced Very High Resolution Radiometer instruments to help determine the leaf area index, or the amount of leaf cover over the planet's vegetated regions. The greening represents an increase in leaves on plants and trees equivalent to area 2 times the continental United States. Not just 1, 2 times. That's got to be good, hasn't it? But what it is, that's just leaf cover. It's not new trees, which is what I thought it implied. Studies have shown that increased concentrations of carbon dioxide increase photosynthesis, spurring plant growth, and you get more leaves. However, carbon dioxide fertilization isn't the only cause of this. Plant growth. Nitrogen, land cover change, climate change by way of global temperature, rain, and sunlight changes all contribute to the green effect. The beneficial impacts of carbon dioxide on plants may also be limited, says the co-author. Studies have shown that plants acclimatise or adjust to rising carbon dioxide concentration, and the fertilisation effect diminishes over time. Now, there's been a new study even more recently which has looked at more what areas are creating most greening, and it turns out that China alone counts for a quarter of the human-caused greening observed since 2000, despite containing only 6.3% of the world's landmass. In China, 42% of the greening comes from the expansion of forests, while 32% comes from cultivated farmlands, the study finds. In India, 82% of greening comes from new croplands. It says it's also important to note that greening observed in China and India is not enough to offset the loss of the world's tropical rainforests, particularly in Brazil. So it goes on to say that the CO2 fertilization effect, well, that's where increase in CO2 levels in the atmosphere bolster the growth of plants, could be less prominent driver of global greening than previously thought. And this is because humans are causing land use change through planting of croplands, forests and other types of vegetation. And this is having a larger impact on global greening than previously thought. So in other words, much of the greening observed on Earth has more to do with direct human interference than the indirect effect of the carbon dioxide fertilization effect. And he does get the bloke that's written the report does go on to say, some have argued that greening is a good side effect of increased CO2 concentration. These generally tend to be climate skeptics. Now we see that land use by humans is a major factor in greening, something not recognised before. So there you go. When you hear someone talking about global greening, just be a bit more sceptical about what they're on about. But anyway, according to evangelical Christians in America, climate change is actually nothing to do with extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's actually caused by sin. Yep, you heard it. Sin is causing climate change. Is that syngas or congas? Anyway, evangelical activist Mary Colbert believes climate change is caused by sin and humans should repent to counteract it. That'd be quite good if that's all it was, wouldn't it? The devil knows what is in the Word of God. I truly believe that because he knows what the Word says, that towards the end times, earthquakes, tornadoes, storms, and all these things are going to happen as the birth pangs of the return of Jesus Christ. Is that what it is? Birthing pangs. Now, the enemy is trying to change that narrative for the mindset of the people that this has to do with climate change, so that they can believe it's something outside of their control that is happening. Well, climate change isn't outside our control, but God is, isn't he? The thing that man needs to do is repent. Repentance would delay things, but because of this hard-heartedness and evil that is increasing, the birth pangs of the earth are getting worse. It has nothing to do with coal. It has nothing to do with climate change. It has to do with sin, nature that's increasing in the earth. Dear me. Colbert and her husband were both listed as being some of the Christian leaders in huge, fucking huge inverted commas, supporting Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Well, thank God for that, eh? That's what we need. More religion and less science.
She's on fire, her name is Gaia, she's on fire, her name is Gaia, she's on fire, her name is Gaia.
Right, well, that'll do for this week. I could do a bit more, but you know, the sun's shining and nature's flowering, and it's the most beautiful time of year. And quite honestly, I mean, this is no disrespect to people that listen, but I can't be arsed. You know, when sometimes you think, do I want to sit inside recording and editing this podcast, or do I want to be outside playing and dicking around in nature? Well, obviously, there's only one choice there. So don't take it personally, but thank you very much once again for listening and being loyal listeners. And thank you to Len for coming on, and enjoy the sun and the summer while it's still going, and I will speak to you soon. I'll see you soon. Okay, bye.
Blog. From Big Blog. From Big Blog.